v.h.s.x? What do you mean?
Alright everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're going to be having a reaction discussion video from TreeLambo titled DBD's Us vs. Them Discourse is Masking the Real Issue. Which I'm interested in hearing this perspective because, as everybody knows, I've also discussed the Us versus Them discussion pretty much ad nauseum at this point. Constantly discussing it because people really are obsessed with the concept of trying to believe that their side is always correct, when in reality it's just a lack of critical thinking that is going on within the DBD community. And thankfully we got a video here that's probably going to reveal something that we may not have heard of. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to cover my thoughts on a couple things. Original video is linked in the description as well if you want to watch the full video on your own.
Well, explained in this video, it really isn't their fault. Everyone who plays this game plays their own matches, plays against their own opponents, and ultimately has their own experiences within the game as a whole. Just because you find this discourse ridiculous, or you are on the opposite side of it than someone else, doesn't make their opinions and experiences wrong or invalid.
I do agree to some extent when discussing something like this. And the reason I say that is because we are a part of a community that takes their anecdotal evidence, their anecdotal perspective, and then claims that that is the factual reality for every single person that they talk to. And if anybody says otherwise, they're completely wrong for that. Now, the problem is that once we're taking into account that there are some things that do remain true across the board with the DBD community, especially when we're talking about MMR level, when we're talking about game balancing, we're talking about different aspects of this game. There is still evidence to prove things to be true because of stats, data, and overall comparing people's experiences that can be proven with clips, video, evidence, data, things like that. So that in itself, I do agree. Sure, the experience can be valid for their own, italicized at the bottom saying this is anecdotal. You know what I mean? That would be, pretty much important to add in because we can't always rely directly on just people's experience. We also need to include evidence, data, things like that to prove the points being made are actually true. And to also understand the perspective of who's speaking about this thing so we can understand which experience is then providing this anecdotal evidence compared with other evidence. And that's what makes a game like this so interesting for me to discuss, because there is so much to discuss when talking about this because of how much different perspectives people have because of their anecdotal experience. But there always will remain a couple of consistencies, a stone in the center of the river, if you will.
Factors that attribute to the feeling of bias or the spreading of the toxicity that surrounds it. And in order to properly understand, we must take a smaller, more focused look on each role in isolation. Starting with the survivor side, glaring issues that disrupt from the standard gameplay loop of Dead by Daylight can often cause mounting frustrations from survivors. This swelling negative feeling more often than not spills over into a sentiment that the game is simply favoring the killer, due to these problems seldom being addressed and more often than not being exacerbated by the balance team. The biggest of these issues being frowned upon strategies such as tunneling, slugging, and hook camping. When a survivor leads the killer on a slightly longer than usual chase, and inevitably gets hooked, they get rewarded for their efforts by 1 or 2 gens being completed. However, this feeling of skillful achievement is immediately erased as the terror radius begins to return as soon as they're unhooked. What other feeling, if not personal attack, is that survivor supposed to feel if the killer goes back on the attack before they're even healed?
That right there is an interesting statement, I would say, especially like with the text on screen saying that tunneling will feel personal. That I think is an interesting concept that I've been very curious about. Because when I played Survivor in the 400 hours of Survivor, according to the DVD stats that I have, within the 400 hours that I did dedicate to that side, I would prefer to have been tunneled, because most of the time when I would play, I wasn't really interested in repairing the gen or healing and doing other things that require me to stand there and fill a bar. I wanted to be in the action, take chase, and do things like that, and I just wasn't always able to do that, and I would just end up back on the gens again, and then just kind of wait around while my teammates get steamrolled, because they have no idea what the hell they're doing. And it was never like very interesting to me, right? And that's obviously also because I just, as a horror movie fan and as a Scream fan, Nightmare on Elm Street, you name it, right? At this point, as a horror movie enjoyer, I've wanted to step into the shoes of that character, and that's also what made me gravitate to just specifically staying on the killer end. Now, when talking about tunneling, at least, as which thankfully Lambo here prefaces it by directly saying it is a strategy, which thank you for that. The fact that they say it feels personal is kind of insane. And I think that's just a matter of perspective. And I think it's because, like, with the Survivor side, it feels like they kind of block out, like, anything that could possibly be the victim mentality when it comes down to playing the game. Because as we understand, if that tunneling is a strategy, then we understand, like, that the player that is trying to do this is trying to gain a strategic advantage. So when that situation occurs, then it has to run through their mind, which logically at least would have to run through their mind and say, well, he's trying to gain a strategical advantage, so let me try to prevent this down from happening as best to my ability, so I can at least give my teammates a better shot at completing the objective, buy more time for my teammate, especially because time is of the essence when we're talking about this game. So that boils down to the objective, obviously, and I think that considering the objective is just do gen, like literally just do gen, time is always going to be against the killer in every situation, so of course they're going to play more efficiently. But for some reason, I don't understand where this mentality sort of comes from, where it's somehow personal, which I don't know if Lambo explains it, but that's something I've always been curious about, because even when I have played Survivor, I preferred to be chased down, because that to me would be way more interesting than having to sit on the gen or heal somebody all day long and save all the time, because it's a lot of downtime. I don't actually get to be in the action.
They're even healed. How could a survivor not feel powerless and disrespected if the killer slugs all 4 members of their team and laughs as they all abandon the match one by one? And even outside of direct gameplay, when dealing with things like character balance, you can't blame the average Survivor player for feeling like this game is killer-sided when they play against their 17th ghoul player of the night and their whole team dies with 4 generators remaining.
So I can understand that perspective. Like, on the surface, you say it sucks to lose, it sucks that I'm only going against this one killer all the time, and it sucks that I'm getting chased down like crazy, and it sucks that I can't do this thing. But I think that's that ties in for both killer and survivor, because when you're playing killer and you want to play a low tier killer, for I would say the average and casuals that do want to play a killer and lack a lot of the experience, but at least want to try the character, you as the killer feel powerless, right? You feel like you're unable to do anything in the situation, because no matter what you're doing, your ability's not doing anything, because you're probably not good at using your abilities. So you're like your main thing, which is your power, is not actually helping you, right? Then you're hearing a bunch of gens go off, and then by the time you even get it down, you hear the horn go off, and then the gates are powered, and then by the time you get the hook and you try to get something else going, oh, they're already bagging at the gate, everybody's out. So it goes both ways. I think that in order to try to even out these sort of perspectives here, both sides need to understand where the other side is coming from when it comes down to these perspectives. Because just as much as the survivor can say, oh, it sucks to do this and that and the third, I can't do anything, that is an answer that is the answer from what that killer probably went up against. He probably was playing Trapper or Skull Merchant or some other weak killer, like even like Pig or something. And then he's like, well, damn, I can't really do what I gotta do with this character. I'm just gonna switch to Kaneki or something, because that's way more fun. I'm fast. I don't have to waste so much time. I can get hits, and I can actually enjoy the game. So then because they're doing that, because of the matches they're going up against, which is probably just like gens are flying, can't get downs, can't do anything, which at the core is a skill issue, and that applies even as well to killer and survivor. It's a skill issue usually, but regardless, in order to try to reduce some of the us versus them, we need to understand that both sides are feeling powerless on either side of the spectrum because of how ridiculous that this game is.
All of these issues compound into a bitter taste being left in the survivor player base, and generally lead to certain select killers, such as the ghoul like I mentioned not too long ago, receiving negative stigma, as the people who play those killers for fun are met with toxic messages, survivors leaving their matches after only 1 or 2 hooks, and blatant invalidation when they attempt to voice their opinions on the state of the game. Even if you're an honest to...
That's the one thing I will say that I want to talk about. Like, blatant invalidations is really dependent on what the frustration is, because a lot of the time, like I've stated, especially with Survivor, a lot of their frustration is stemming from their own lack of ability to understand how to play. Now, are there some cases where it's probably, which I would say probably rare, but there are some cases where it probably is a bit BS. I mean, yeah, probably. But when you do review the gameplay, or you do review the killer's perspective, like, you'll see that it was a blatant blunders that stacked on top of each other from the survivor side that led to them getting demolished. And then they complain that, oh, why are we losing because of this killer and because of this map? And it's like, but your teammate had dropped this amount of pallets, and then your teammate had gotten down at this point, and then this perk then activated. So then this happens, and then you can just kind of see all the dominoes fall, which leads to them losing. But because they only have such a small little window of the perspective of what the heck is going on, which, mind you, as well, which I have to state this, it's in the HUD, by the way. Like, I don't know, like, I've seen a clip actually recently where a survivor was like confused that their teammate was dead when they have little tally marks next to their names. So I started to wonder, like, what the heck are they looking at when they're playing the game? Because they were running around the map, and I'm like, okay, but you're not being chased, like, you're just walking around. You don't even glance at the HUD like once to like know what the heck everybody's doing. Like, this is vital information. Like, and you're not even gonna use it. Like, that just blew my mind. So and then I also saw, like, they were pretty frustrated about a hit they had gotten from a nemesis. And then when you look at the nemesis's perspective, I'm like, yeah, that hits. Like, the corner of the car was low enough. Like, you're gonna get hit by that. Like, that's gonna make sense. And they wanted to say, oh, I was already around the corner. I'm like, you know, you weren't. Like, you know, so yeah, it's just, you know, it's a lot of the, like, that's probably why people be like, oh, I'm not being validated. But it's like, if your statement like that is over encompassing in that kind of way is directly disproven by evidence and directly showing that it is a skill issue, at that point it's not invalidation. It's a way to, like, reflect and go, well, damn, maybe I messed up there. And that's what it should be. But that's not the DVD community. So,
goodness ghoul player who isn't toxic, doesn't tunnel, and just plays him because you like Tokyo Ghoul, you'll still experience this toxicity solely due to the killer-sided ghoul OP narrative. And of course, it's not just ghoul. It's not even all of the high-tier killers either. Skull Merchant, who is considered to be one of the worst killers in the entire game by some, received hate simply because at one point she was a very strong and not fun to play against killer. It was...
I completely agree with Lambo here again. I mean, very well said. I mean, Skull Merchant was completely destroyed like many months ago, and people still complain that she even exists. Her power doesn't even function. Like, she doesn't do anything. She's Trapper without traps. Like, what are we talking about? She has nothing in her kit. And they're still gonna complain about a character like that? It's mind freaking boggling, dude. Like, mind boggling. So I'm gonna go ahead and move forward to, like, a bit more of the killer discussion. If you want to watch the full video, it'll be linked in the description.
When these vocal groups of disgruntled players give negative feedback on a change, justified or not, the survivor player base will say things like, "Just say you're bad," or "average insert killer player," instead of giving.
Yeah, that's 100% correct, Lambo. That is 100% correct. Anytime you make any valid with evidence provided, like full on like document, you'll get a TLDR, skill issue, TLDR, you're just whining and crying. It's like, yeah, but you don't even acknowledge what I just said. Like, you don't even take into account what is being stated. And that's why I always am saying like that the game is survivor favored, not sided, because if it were completely survivor sided, I would say that like the win rates would look a little different, even for myself as a lower tier killer main, considering, you know, most of my killers are about the C to D tier, but my win rate like specifically for Ghostface is currently at an 84% or something like that. So I'm still getting data for it, but still pretty good, pretty consistent so far. And I would say that it's been proven very survivor favored. And you can literally provide all sorts of evidence and then they'll just say, oh, that's a skill issue, tunneling is a skill issue. It's like, it's mind-blowing to me that strategy is in itself is a skill issue to them, but yet they can use strategies that are blatantly exploits and things like that, and those aren't even remotely acknowledged. Like, they're just like, oh no, that's just a tech, look, what are you talking about? And it's like, no, it's not. Like, you know, shift teching in this track is a blatant exploit. Like, you're removing the capability to maintain chase so that you can keep infinitely using the window. Like, that's an exploit. Like,
giving them space to voice their own experiences. This feeling of repression from the game's balance and from members of the community often feed into the toxic behavior within the game, bringing about things like tunneling and hook camping, proving again that both sides of this argument keep dumping more gasoline on the fire, fighting a war no one's ever going to win. Now, obviously, there are ways for both sides to combat several of the issues I've mentioned. Survivors have access to several perks that assist them in battling against slugging. Waiting to unhook your teammates instead of going for them immediately can do a lot to prevent hook camping, as the killer will be forced to give up a lot of generator progress to do so. On the killer side, running Lightborn or Forced Hesitation can do a lot against bully squads, and plenty of killers have ways to combat pallet density as well. However, none of these solutions are perfect, and don't even cover many of the other issues both roles face, such as...
Yeah, I completely agree with Lambo on that as well. There are options for both sides, and I think that both sides are not really bringing that to help supplement those issues. Like, if you're going against people that have flashlights or you see a lot of toolboxes, it's probably perfectly valid to have a Franklin's Weave build. Even though it got nerfed to the ground, I will still say it's a pretty decent combination for info and things like that, especially because you can keep knocking the item out of their hand, and then you can see when they come back for the item, giving you free information. So I would say it's not terrible. It's definitely not a terrible option. Obviously there's other perks that are way better, but it's, you know, for I would say for most killers you can probably use a build like that and it would probably be fine. You could probably even pair it with characters that have the option to make survivors drop their items, because obviously M1s are not the only way you could do that with certain killers like Bubba or Legion. So like, that's an option too. Even Lightborn, if you see a lot of flashlights, things like that, I mean, those are definitely choices. It obviously, like Lambo had just stated, it doesn't really directly solve the problem, but it does offer something. You know, it's an option, and I would imagine that the vast majority of people are not picking D tier, C tier anyway. So like, B tier and up, usually you're probably gonna be fine. Like, you're probably going to be fine. And if you're somebody who uses, like, you know, all the letters of the of the rankings, most people are not playing F tier, E, C tiers really. Like, you're probably going to be playing B and A and whatever, like, you know, just to keep it simple. You're not going to be using, like, I imagine the vast majority are not using weak killers. Like, so those killers that are available to you that aren't trash are going to have answers to a lot of things. You know, and I look at Dracula like a perfect example, who's a very strong killer. I look at Vecna as a fantastic option for, I would say, an A or maybe even a B tier killer that has options to combat a lot of things. And you just have to look into your kit. I even argue that Wraith, I would say, is a B tier, who has good map traversal, good stealth, has add-on variety off the wazoo. Like, he works with a lot of great perks. He's not terrible. Like, he's really not a weak killer, like, by any, I mean, I wouldn't say he's like S tier, but he's not a weak killer by any means. That character has options. So it's like, it's not like you're completely powerless against a lot of these things either. And that applies to both sides.
Balance changes or neglect with killer design, or other issues like tunneling. The whole thing seems hopeless. One side's frustration provokes the other, causing them to boil with anger as well, and it keeps going back and forth. So that must mean that it's no one's fault, right? Well, dear viewers, that could not be farther from the truth. On Dead by Daylight. This dev team has constantly and almost unapologetically failed both player bases of this game. Both the killer community and the survivor community are constantly having their time completely disrespected by the development team of this game. With constant
I have to say that I'm going to agree. Just point out that I completely agree with that. Behavior might be the bigger issue, but if you want to listen in on why behavior is the bigger issue according to the video, go ahead and check out the link in the description. And I just gotta say, I completely agree with it. I've covered a lot of points in this video, so if you want to watch other videos talking about these topics, check out the channel and check out the original video as well, of course. Also, we got links in the description to support the channel. Consider becoming a member on Patreon or on YouTube, so you can have access to exclusive perks, content, emotes, and other things like that, and as well as have your name appear at the end of every video. And I appreciate you guys being here. Consider following on TikTok and subbing on Twitch potentially as well to also get your name right off, and I will see you guys in the next one. Well, I wanted to go ahead and take some time out to thank all my members from Patreon with Crow King 101, my YouTube members, Majora Jeff, Endire, Evil Peachy YT, Zero Mocker, Christian, HexDev, and Crow Vader, and for my Twitch subscribers, Cake is the Road, Danica 2002, Final Girl _ Bunny, Acklefin, Chili Cinderace, Zero Mocker, Ginsburg, Johns 117 _ Lovely Ghost TTV, Jar TTV, Zazabu, and Crow Vader. Just wanted to thank you guys. And if you also want to have your name read off at the end of every video, make sure you join on one of these platforms to get one of those perks, as well as the other perks you get. So, appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much.